right. Hey, welcome everybody to episode 1 of the Parenthood. We are going to have some topics that's all about family, marriage, parents, and kids. And so we can't wait to jump in today's conversation. Today we're talking about the impact that having children has on a marriage and how the relationship changes over time. And so I've asked some of my friends to join us here today. We've got Debbie Pesch, Casey Sylvain, and you guys probably know Pastor Robert Hilson. I'll just start by jumping right in, and I want us to each talk a little bit about how long you've been married, who you're married to, and how many children you have. And let's start ladies first.
Okay, well, I've been married 32 years, 33 years.
That's awesome.
We have 2 kids, 18 and 16.
Okay.
And it's been wonderful so far.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Casey, as he said. Dave and I have been married for 15 years, and we have 3 children, 4 actually, 3 biological, 1 adopted, 11, 13, 9, and 23.
That's the adopted one, right?
Yes.
All right, 22.
Casey's only 25, so she couldn't possibly have a 23-year-old.
Oh.
All right, so I've been married 3 years. It'll be 4 in June, and we have 1 kid.
Awesome. And everybody probably knows little Nora.
Yeah.
Yes.
And my wife Toya and I, we have been married for 13 years. We have 3 children, 13-year-old. If you're doing the math, I know what you're thinking. I'll explain it later. An 11-year-old and a 9-year-old. So let's start with the newbie.
All right.
So when you think about your relationship that you had with Amanda, what was it like before Nora came into the world?
So it was definitely different. It was not. So we did a lot less together.
Okay.
It was a weird time. So Amanda was working night shift right when we got married. She was a nurse, and so we basically didn't see each other 3 days a week, and so then she got a different job, and I've been at the church the whole time, but she got a different job, and even still, she was like doing notes and everything else till like almost midnight because it was another nursing job. So Nora kind of came along, and we actually spent more time together, but we probably spend less time focused on each other. But I know that it's not normal, or at least not always this way, that like having a child like improves your relationship. Like sometimes it can be a divisive situation and things like that, but for us, for the most part, it's made things better. Communications got better, and we have honestly, when we got married, we didn't have a whole lot in common. I love sports, and she likes to make fun of me for loving sports. You know what I mean? And so like there's just all these other things too. Basically, like I love to eat meat. She's vegan. Like that's our whole story. Like,
Opposites attract.
Yeah, totally opposite. Yeah. And so Nora kind of gave us something to unify around. So for me, that's kind of, it's gotten better. So far, but we're like 14 months in.
Yeah. Debbie, take us back to before you guys had kids, and it's just you and Mike. And how did he woo you?
Oh, well, I can tell you from day one. We met on July 9th, 1980 at the St. Charles Safeway parking lot. And typically we have been together ever since. So we're childhood sweethearts.
Okay.
We got married when I was 20, and we didn't have our first child, Michael, until 13 years later.
Oh, wow.
So we had a lot in common. We enjoyed a lot of the same things. So we traveled, we went out, we fished, we crabbed, we did a lot of things. We had some wild days too, and we got it out of our system, and then God blessed us with Michael. It was difficult getting pregnant. We did lose our first one, which was, we got through that and it was fine, and we didn't think we were able to have children. And then when God blessed us with Michael, it did bring us closer in some ways, but there was other days were a little frustrating.
Sure.
But we're blessed with really good kids, so that makes it easy.
I want to jump into Casey's story, but I kind of want to stay here for just a second too, because 13 years is a long period of time to spend with the same person before having a child come in that changes the entire dynamic. Can you talk a little bit more about how that shift happened once you guys did actually have a child?
We knew that we were ready to have a child because we were going to be responsible for another life. And so we were on board with that, and we were ready at the same time. But it was a little stressful, you know, when you have a new baby and it's nerve-wracking. You don't know, even though I come from a large family, but, you know, it had its trials and errors. But we overcome it, definitely. He was a great dad. He proved himself to be a good dad, you know, with feedings and stuff. And there were some times I'd get a little frustrated with him, like you could, you know, step up a little bit more, you know, because it he had a little bit more freedom than I had. And so sometimes I would get a little frustrated with that, but especially through the infant toddler stage, he was a great cuddler. You know, the kids loved to snuggle up to him and go to sleep. But
That's how I view Mike.
Absolutely,
He's a great cuddler.
He was a great cuddler. But as far as him and I and doing things together, it did slow down a little. You know, I mean, Mike's the kind of person that as you all know, when he's involved in something, he's 110%. He rode at the rescue squad. He had his business. When it was time to raise a family, he stepped back and stopped riding at the rescue squad and stuff. I mean, he definitely makes his family priority.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Casey, how'd you meet Dave?
Well, we actually met on my doorstep, which is kind of weird, but I went through a rebellious period in life because I grew up in the church, and I threw a party, and he came with somebody who came to that party, and through other circumstances, we started talking that night, and we've really talked ever since that night. So life before children was just about us, like going out and going to dinner and being with friends and just being young, because we got married. I was 19 and he was 19 or 20. Like we have close birthdays, so we were really young. Yeah. So we just were living the young life before we had kids.
Yeah, I know all about living the young life.
Yes, we did.
before getting married. So we were 22. We were 23 actually when we got married. And so I'm sure those of you that are great at math, and you're putting together, we've been married 13 years and we have a 13-year-old. So the story was Toya and I met in middle school. We were middle school sweethearts. She was my first girlfriend, all that sort of stuff, whatever that means in middle school. But then fast forward, we went to different high schools and colleges and all that sort of stuff. But then got back together when we were about 21, 22. And before we got into the church, we had already created a child. And so shortly thereafter, we got married and things progressed. We got saved and all of that sort of stuff. But that's kind of the origin story for us. Yeah. So I'll have a different perspective a little bit because we already had a child before we got married. And if there's one thing that I often tell couples that are in premarital counseling, if they say that they want children in their marriage, I always say, take some time to enjoy and discover each other. Yeah. Right. Get to know, your spouse, because once that baby comes, that is an 18-year commitment, and really we know it goes on beyond that, but it changes the dynamics of things. So, Debbie, you said something, and and just tell me if you don't want to share, we'll move on. But can you talk about, I think for so many people, there's a pain of having lost a child. Yeah. My wife and I have experienced that as well. And I think it's something that many people suffer in silence about, but there's a lot of people out there that have that story. Sure. And if you would share just a little bit about what that experience was for you.
Yeah, it was, I actually had a tubal pregnancy. I didn't know. I'd never been pregnant before, and I was going to the doctors, and they told me I was pregnant, and I'm like, wow. I couldn't wait to call them and tell them. And then I just, started having some complications. I went back, and the doctor's like, oh, the baby's not growing. Put me, it's a long story, but put me on hormones and stuff. And then I went back again, and then they said, well, you had a miscarriage. So it was like, wow. And so it was New Year's Eve. We had to go in for a sonogram. And Mike and I sat in the room waiting for the doctor to come tell us, which we already knew. But no one wanted to come tell us because it was bad news, and it was New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we were like, we're going to leave. But anyways, a couple of days later, I had to go have a D&C. And then a couple of days after that, I started having complications and went back and come to find out I was still pregnant.
Oh, wow.
So it was a really crazy story.
Yeah.
So they said it must be in your tube. So sure enough, it was. So I lost my tube, which only decreased my chances of getting pregnant by 10% or whatever. So we kind of thought, well, you know what, and that kind of pulled us closer together, and we just knew that everything happens for a reason, and it just wasn't meant to be.
Wow.
So, and he's a good shoulder to cry on.
Sure.
And somebody had given us these baby booties, and I never did find them. And so when I went to move the furniture, they were behind the TV. He had put them behind the TV.
Oh.
So he dealt with it in a different way.
Yeah.
But so we thought, you know what? Well, we can't have children, so we actually started the process to become foster parents, and
Wow.
we got the paperwork and stuff, and then I got pregnant. And so that got put on hold, and so here we are. But it was tough, but we got through it with each other, and we just knew that it was just, it just happened, and we had no control over it.
Sure.
And it was just, maybe something was wrong with the baby or something. It just wasn't God's will at that time.
Yeah.
So.
I remember, thank you for sharing that
sure.
story. I remember, normally you hear about the woman's side of a miscarriage, but it affects the dads too.
Sure.
And it was a couple of years ago. Our child would be 5, he or she, because we never found out the gender. But I remember when Toya told me that she had miscarried, and we went to the hospital, and it was just like, I've never been in a fight before. But I felt like somebody clocked me upside the head.
Yeah.
And I remember just this flood of emotions, and I didn't know, I didn't know how I was going to react in that
Right.
moment. But just to contemplate the loss of a child was something that I wasn't prepared for. And we both grieved through that, but I found more so my wife had to comfort me rather than me comforting her through that. And it's just something, maybe somebody out there that's watching
Sure.
this has experienced that, and how that affects a relationship. But it's a
Yes.
time to come together, to be empathetic,
Absolutely.
to pray, and to be, like you said, a shoulder to cry
Yeah.
on, and a shoulder of strength for each other.
Yeah, it was.
Looking back on all these awesome stories of how we all have gotten together, what was something that you think, before you had your first child, what was something that was important for you to establish in your relationship?
Date night for us,
Okay.
because we love to spend time together. We just do. We have a great time together. We always have. So that was one thing that we really wanted to make a priority. Whether we were able to was a different story when our kids are really young, because we found out we were pregnant 7 months after getting married, and that was not in the plan at all. Like, that came 2 years and 3 months way too early.
Yeah.
So
7 months after marriage, 13 years
Yeah.
after marriage.
Yeah. So it was shocking.
Yeah. You guys, I know for certain you guys actually still practice that
Yes.
that process of going out on date
Yes.
nights, because just recently, I know you had posted about it.
Yep.
Going to a place locally.
Yep.
To do some craft together.
Yeah.
Talk about maybe is Dave a romantic kind of guy?
Well, so we're talking about things that change after having kids, right? So before we had kids, he absolutely was. Or even before we got married, he was. Since being married and having kids, no. Just gonna be honest.
Let's just get it out there.
No,
Step
because
it up, Dave.
life changes. Like your priority
Yeah,
changes.
absolutely.
You're not wooing anymore. You're like when they're little, you're surviving. Like
Yeah.
that's
Right.
just reality. So no, like he isn't, and we've had that argument many times about that changing because I really liked that side of
Yes.
our relationship before children.
For the record,
Yeah.
I'm totally with Dave. My wife has reminded me of that many times. You need to get back to the old Colby.
Yep.
Right.
You're in the throes of it right
Oh
now
yeah, no,
with,
but I
with
still
a
get accused of
1-year-old.
the same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's a thing already. So
Yeah.
I think it wasn't even a child that did it. It was just getting
No,
married.
right. See?
I don't know. There's like that element of like,
You got to wait till I'm done drinking.
there's that element of like, I won the prize. So
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And,
Right.
You put romance up on a
yeah,
shelf.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that's definitely like the romance and all that stuff is. Sometimes it gets kind of thrown by the wayside, and
Yeah.
there's a million things because of it. I mean, like this right here. We're in the middle of a health crisis, and
Sure.
so we're doing everything we can to make things happen. And so I've seen my wife when I wake up and kiss her goodbye, and when I go to bed, and I try to rub her back before she goes to sleep every night, but I've gone to sleep before her every night for the past 5 nights because
Yeah.
we've so
12-hour days will do that. too.
right.
Yeah.
And so there's that, but there's just we've had the conversation as
Yeah.
well, and we try to do date night, we try to do all the other stuff. Got an added challenge because like right now we're in a 1-bedroom apartment situation because we're building a house, and so the baby's right there
Yeah.
all the time, and so the biggest thing for us, man, is we've figured out like 3 days away is worth 2 months of date nights.
Sure.
Like so.
Yeah.
We started doing that. The first time was for my birthday, and after that we did it again a month ago for Amanda's birthday, and so but that makes just a huge difference, and it really keeps a lot of conversations from happening,
Yeah.
and the bad ones.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. I'm a recovering workaholic, and say recovering because it's a process, right?
Yeah.
And so a couple years ago, 2 years ago, I found myself like working really hard. My wife was leading a school at the time, and so we were both working long hours. And we got to the end of the year, and we noticed that we hadn't taken a vacation. We really hadn't gone anywhere together as a family or as a couple in a really long time. And it just so happened that for both of our jobs, if you don't use that PTO, you lose it. And we were both like really bummed about it. We were like, oh my God, we're exhausted. We really need to spend some time together. So we made a vow. We were going to every year take, now it sounds excessive, but we're going to take 3 vacations. The reason I put quotes around it is because one is a family vacation. I took the kids. We hadn't gone anywhere, so we went to Disney that year, and that about wiped out my bank account. And so we did that. Then Toya and I got away, and we went to Cancun, and so we spent a week away without the kids. But then the third one is one that we don't normally think about. We said that each of us was going to have our own kind of separate vacations. And that could just be a staycation. So sometimes it could be Toya just stays at home and I take the kids and we go somewhere for the night, or vice versa. because we all need still alone time. And that has made all the difference in the world for our mental health and for our relationship, because the kids feel included, but then they also know that it's important for mom and dad to get time away, and then for us individually to get away. So if you've got the margin or can do that, that's something I would strongly suggest implementing.
Yeah.
Debbie, how have you and Mike been able to keep the fires lit for 32
well,
years?
If you ask him, sometimes the fire's not lit. No. Actually, we have a hot tub. And
There you go.
had a
All
hot
right, get a hot tub, everybody. That's
we
it.
have a hot tub, and we will literally get up at 5 in the morning or earlier, and we'll get in the hot tub, and
There
we
you
have
go.
great conversations in the hot tub, and
Conversation.
So, but I found that talking really does help, because sometimes I'll hold things in until it gets to that point. But
Sure.
but we talk, and we try to have vacations where him and I go alone. We don't get to do it every year, but we definitely try to do family vacations, because it's, my thing is they grow up so fast, you know, and I just want to embrace it. But we do try to at least every once in a while in the fall or spring go away, even if it's for a long weekend, just the two of us.
Yeah.
You know. So
Talk a little bit about that. Your children are older now.
yes.
And what's it like approaching the empty nest phase?
Empty nest. I know. I've been thinking about
I'm
it.
living for that.
I
Like
know.
that's a goal
That's
on my
him.
calendar.
That's
I'm like,
him, I
yes,
know.
but
It's him. I'm like, well, Michael left for college last August, and there was definitely a hole, you know, and we weren't sure how we were going to handle that. And I always heard our friends and stuff, and I actually did pretty well. I think I did better than Mike. Because Mike was calling him every day, and I'm like, I got to give him his space, you know, I got to let him be a man. And but you know what, he's such a good kid, and God has such a plan for him, and we know that.
Yeah.
So that made it easy, and the fact that, you know, he's going to Liberty made it a little bit easier too. And plus Madison, who's 16 now, she's extremely involved in school and sports, so that was a distraction for me. So we stay on the go with her sports, which is all year long.
Sure.
And so that helped. But I know it's coming, and she's becoming more independent. She's starting to drive. In August, she'll be driving herself.
Oh wow.
So I thought, what am I going to do with myself? You know, and I'll finally have a clean house, hopefully. But,
your
hopefully I'll have a
dreams
clean
will be
house.
realized finally.
And Mike and I have talked. I'm like, maybe we can foster, and he's like, no. And but he said maybe we can get back on track the way it was, you know, and spend some more time together and do the things that we enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And I'll be able to do more in church and things that I want to do, because I don't get a lot of me time. I really don't. But that's okay. You know, I get to do what I have to do with them. And there's some mornings I get resentful because I got to get up and pack lunch and make breakfast. And they're like, you still make your kids breakfast? I do.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I do.
Yeah.
I made Michael breakfast all the way until he left. And now he's home. I get to make him breakfast again. But no, it's, you know, it's hard. And when she leaves, I'm like, wow, what are we? But we'll figure it out. And, we did it for 13 years, so, you know, and to be different because we're older, we're not as wild and crazy as we were back then. I picture myself relaxing somewhere with a cup of coffee on the porch swing. That's what I'm hoping for.
Nothing wrong with that.
I know. I hope so.
You know, there's a scary stat out, and you guys have done it the right way, which is staying connected to each other all throughout this process. But there's a lot of challenges to that. And the scary stat is that one of the number one growing age ranges or lifestyle phases of people that are getting divorced is folks that are entering into the empty nest phase.
Right.
And the thing that happens is you get so focused on the kids that you forget to focus on each other.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's just something, maybe somebody can chime in here on how do you maintain the focus on your marriage to stay strong and not let your kids' schedules and everything dominate.
She gave the answer. You get
yeah.
a hot tub.
You get a hot tub.
You have good morning conversation. If I knew that hot tubs led to morning conversation, I would already have a hot tub.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
I'm going to trade in my car tomorrow and get a hot tub.
We're on our second one.
You're building a house. You get
I don't care. I'm getting a hot tub.
We're on our second hot
Are you
tub.
kidding? If it's that easy?
Yeah. I mean, we have put our marriage on the back burner when it comes to the kids because you're so crazy busy.
Yeah.
And it does get stressful at times, and you want to pull your hair out.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have time to be sick. You don't have time to do anything. You just go for them. But you overcome it and you get through it.
Yeah.
You know, you got to keep things in perspective.
Right.
You know what it's about, and I know eventually they are going to be gone, and then there will be time for him and I, and hopefully we will have conversations and something to talk about, because I know a lot of families, they don't. They're like, what are we going to talk about?
Right.
You know, but hopefully we will, and God will definitely use us in some way.
Yeah.
For us, their younger years were really tough. We had them back to back to back. And looking back, you know, I always said I wanted to be done by 25 because I want to be a young, wonderful grandmother.
A glam mom.
I do. But we missed out on that time together, those 13 years. Like, we really did miss out on that. And it was so hard. We didn't communicate. It was like, hi in the morning, see you when you get home from work, I'm passing out when you get home. That was many years. And so me being a stay-at-home mom during those years, like, now I can look back and say I was blessed and my husband really worked hard for me to be able to stay home with them. But I resented him then because he was able to go out and I had to stay home.
Yeah.
And so I dealt with diapers, I dealt with puke, I dealt with disobedience, I dealt with everything.
Tantrums.
Absolutely, everywhere. And we had little boys who dealt with sensory issues when they were young. So the tantrums were big for me.
Yeah.
It was really embarrassing. So I didn't want to take them out anywhere. And I felt awful as a mom, but I knew, like, I wasn't adequately prepared for that. I was in my 20s, like under 25, dealing with these two little boys who would just throw fits all the time at the drop of a hat, just because they didn't understand their bodies and their space and all that. So I really had to deal with resentment towards Dave for having a job, going out and being human, I would call him, like, because I just didn't feel human ever when they were little.
How did you guys get through that period?
It was a lot of fighting, honestly. We fought a lot our first 7 years of marriage, really. Like, it was ugly. And, you know, marriage isn't always fun. It's not always great. The movies and books don't portray what it really is. Like, there are a lot of nights where you go to bed screaming at each other.
Absolutely.
That's just
Throwing
reality,
things.
right? Like,
Right.
in our old house, there's a hole in the wall, unless the people who bought it fixed it. That was my cell phone. Like, I just hopped that thing, because you just can't control yourself when you're sleep deprived, when you haven't had proper nutrition, because you're just feeding them and getting them bathed and fed and to the doctors and just everything. It's so consuming. Your whole life is raising these amazing little kids, but challenging little kids. So it wasn't until 7 years in when really Dave and I sat down and said, God, you've got to do something. Because I come from a home, I love my mom and my dad's dearly, but I come from a home where divorce was prevalent. And that's my nature. Like, it's in me to run. And so we had to choose, and I still choose. Like, I'm not going to run. I choose you. You choose me. Good, bad, or ugly. Like, that's just it for us.
That's I can relate to that because our kids are the same ages, and we had them back to back to back. And I remember it was, honestly, our kids saved our marriage because for us, that option was always there. Like, both of us, our kids, actually, it wasn't divorce for us. Our parents were never together. For my wife and myself. And so that was always an option too, that when things get hard, it's like, all right, I don't have to put up with this. I'm out. And then a kid comes. And you go, okay, we're gonna fix this. We're going to, you know, do it for the kid and all that sort of thing. And then life happens, you take a dive, the relationship struggles again, and then another kid comes. And so it makes you refocus. And then finally, it was one day, I remember, I think I told this story before, but the D word, divorce, was always that trump card, that nuclear option, that it was just like, things have gotten so bad, I'm going to slam that card on the table and it's going to squash all this. And one day I remember we got into this big fight and I take off running, it's cold, or walking actually, and it's cold outside, and I walked, I don't know, a country mile to a friend's house, and he was like, man, you must really be mad. Like, you know how far it is from your house to mine? And I was just like explaining to him what happened. He's going, it's okay. He calls my wife for me because I didn't want to talk to her. And he says, he's going to stay here. He's cool, but we're coming back in the morning. And he sat me down and chewed me out. And if there's anything that I can say that's a word of advice for somebody, is marriage is not just two people. You got to have some other people. You got to have somebody else in your life. And I'm not just talking about Jesus. That's obviously, but you need to have a community, somebody else that's going to tell you your stuff stinks and you need to go deal with it, clean yourself up. Because if that hadn't happened, it wasn't my own internal resolve that says I need to go back and reconcile with my wife. Man, it was a brother that said, no, you need to do this because you're in the wrong just as much as she is. And that was a turning point for us. And we said, no longer, we're taking the D card out of the deck. And so we can no longer throw that down unfairly, you know, in an argument. And things really started to change after that. Does anybody, just to wrap up, does anybody have one of those stories, kind of like what Casey shared, where maybe things were going down a bad path and it centered around your kids? Like, the kids were supposed to be those things that you both were able to focus together on, but maybe your kids were the thing that was driving a wedge in between you. Do you guys have any stories like that?
Not really.
Good.
We fought a couple times before kids, and I would call his mom, and she'd call him and tell him to straighten up. So I don't have her anymore. I wish I still had her, but no, I can say we really didn't fight a lot during this whole. You know, we always tried to agree, and if we did disagree and or not getting along, we would try absolutely not to show it in front of the kids. Very rare did the kids. Sometimes I couldn't hold it in though. And I'd say, your father, it's driving me crazy. And Madison would get right on board, of course. But yeah, we tried to not do it in front of the kids. So
that's a good practice.
It is. Yeah, because they don't need that, on top of everything else in life, to think that mom and dad aren't getting along. I mean, they can kind of tell because in the house it's not always perfect. And especially if one of us lose our temper or whatever, which it happens. I mean, not just the other day, I was freaking out. They weren't even home, they didn't even know. And I was just so mad because I didn't feel good and I had to get up and leave the house. Because Mike was working and I'm like, I can't even have a sick day. I just want a sick day. And I was so sick, so I took the toilet paper and I thought of you and I was hitting the wall with the toilet paper. It's very valuable toilet paper.
I was going to say, wow. Man.
But I took it out on that toilet paper. I don't even think he knew. I was so sick because it wasn't his fault. I was just frustrated with life because you can't even have a sick day. You got to get up and run. And I had to go get Madison from school. And I was very frustrated. I was like, so we all go through that. And the toilet paper got the worst end.
I think on this end of that question, obviously Nora can't talk yet. So driving, well, she can kind of talk, but not full sentences. She's smart enough to be divisive already. Because every once in a while I'll punish her and she'll be like, "Mommy," and and then basically be like, "Look what he did." And she's already doing that. But one of the things I think that's so far, like in this stage, so somebody that would be in this stage of life, for us, it's kind of worked, is we just try to fight early and fight when it has to be done. You know what I mean? Like avoiding it, that's me. You know, I can't avoid it. Amanda is an avoider. I can't. So we fight because of that. But, you know, that's kind of been part of our marriage and our makeup in our relationship is like, we're not going to be afraid to have the fights. And we're going to have them, then we're going to fix it, and we're going to move on. Yeah. And so the thing I think so far that's made the last 15 months enjoyable is when it comes up, I mean, we have it out, and that's a terrible day. You know, it's awful because we're complete opposites. So fights are like, it's like pulling teeth because I'm the one who's like trying to have the conversation, and she's like, no, you know, I'm tired of you, shut up, you know, and it's just like, ugh. So, you know, and then I do things to annoy her because at least then she'll talk, and it's a mess, right? I'm not saying we fight well, but we fight early before it becomes a big problem. And so far it's worked. In a different stage of life, it probably won't work because we'll probably be a little bit more tired of each other. But right now, it's working, and it's been really helpful because it makes us communicate about things maybe we wouldn't communicate about.
Yeah, so. I think that's really important. I always share with couples that I counsel, it's not about fighting or not. Pretty much fights are inevitable, but it's learning how to fight fair. And your kids actually are an added dynamic in that because kids are really good at being putting you on the defense. And they employ a strategy called divide and conquer. Like you said, Nora's only one, and she already goes, "Mom," you know. They know how to try and drive that wedge in there. But it's important for us as parents to never forget, as much as we love our kids, to never forget about the love that we had first and foremost for our spouse.
Yeah.
And so if nothing else, if you don't take away anything else, try and employ some of these strategies that we have all been talking about through our stories, and remember who you're married to, and the love, and to model a healthy relationship for the children that you're parenting. Yeah. Well, that's it for Parenthood today. We've got plenty of other great topics, great people that are going to join me here on the set, and we can't wait for you guys to continue to tune in. Remember to like, to share, to subscribe. Tell your friends if you're enjoying this content that you've been watching. Man, invite them or share it with them. And you guys feel free, write in some topics that you would love to hear us talk about. But anyway, that's it for us today. We look forward to seeing you all real soon.